Hamas appointed Yahya Sinwar as its new political leader on Tuesday, as the successor to former chief Ismail Haniyeh, who was assassinated in Tehran last week. The move reinforces the radical path pursued since the October 7th attack on Israel. Sinwar, the architect of the most devastating attack on Israel in decades, has been hiding in Gaza, evading Israeli attempts to kill him since the start of the war. News of Sinwar's appointment came as Israel braces for a likely attack from Iran, following the killing of Haniyeh in Tehran. It may also reinforce Israeli leader Benjamin Netanyahu's insistence that Israel must pursue its campaign in Gaza to the end. Meanwhile, US Secretary of State Antony Blinken said a ceasefire must be the primary goal.
With regard to Mr. Sinwar, he has been and remains the primary decider when it comes to concluding a ceasefire. And so I think this only underscores the fact that it is really on him to decide whether to move forward with a ceasefire that manifestly will help so many Palestinians in desperate need, women, children, men, who are caught in the crossfire of Hamas's making in Gaza.
Sinwar, who has spent half his adult life in Israeli prisons, was the most powerful Hamas leader left alive following the assassination of Haniyeh, which has left the region on the brink of a wider conflict after Iran vowed harsh retaliation. Israel has not claimed responsibility for the assassination, but it has said it killed other senior Hamas leaders. Born in a refugee camp in the southern Gaza city of Khan Yunis, 61-year-old Sinwar was elected as Hamas leader in Gaza in 2017, after gaining a reputation as a ruthless enforcer among Palestinians and a ruthless enemy of Israel. Israel's chief military spokesman, Rear Admiral Daniel Hagari, blamed Sinwar for the October 7th attack and said Israel would continue to pursue him.
In a televised speech on Tuesday, the leader of Hezbollah promised a strong and effective response to the assassination of its military commander by an Israeli strike. Syed Hassan Nasrallah said the Lebanese Shia militia group would wait for the right moment to respond, but did not hint on its form or timing. And he said all international attempts at persuading Hezbollah not to retaliate were futile. There was no comment from the Israeli military. A July 30th strike killed Fuad Shukr in a Beirut suburb. He is the most senior Hezbollah figure killed in nearly 10 months of conflict with Israel. Nasrallah's promise of vengeance comes amid rising fears that the Middle East could tip into full-blown war. Hezbollah is the most powerful regional militia armed and equipped by Iran. Iran has promised to retaliate after an explosion in Tehran killed Ismail Haniyeh, the political leader of the Palestinian Hamas Islamist group. Iran blames Israel.
On Ismail Haniyeh, we are not commenting on that particular incident.
Israel has not claimed responsibility for Haniyeh's death. Hezbollah earlier on Tuesday said it launched a swarm of attack drones at northern Israel. A Reuters video filmed drones over the city of Nahariya. Israel said 2 civilians were injured. While Nasrallah spoke, plumes of smoke were spotted over the Israel-Lebanon border. The White House on Tuesday said U.S. President Joe Biden spoke with the leaders of Qatar and Egypt to discuss efforts to de-escalate tensions.
Kamala Harris picked Minnesota Governor Tim Walz to be her Democratic running mate in the presidential election.
Tim Walz, governor of Minnesota.
He's a 60-year-old U.S. Army National Guard veteran and former teacher who, in 2006, was elected to the U.S. House of Representatives in a Republican-leaning district in Minnesota. He served 12 years as a congressman before he was elected governor of Minnesota in 2018. Walz has pushed a progressive agenda in Minnesota that includes free school meals, goals for tackling climate change, tax cuts for the middle class, and expanded paid leave for Minnesota workers. He's long advocated for women's reproductive rights. He's also shown a conservative approach to defending government support for farmers and military veterans, as well as backing gun rights. But in his first campaign for governor, he supported gun control measures. As governor, he assigned Minnesota's Attorney General to lead the prosecution in the May 2020 killing of George Floyd by a white Minneapolis police officer. The Harris campaign hopes his extensive National Guard career, his successful run as a high school football coach,
turkey's meat,
Not in Minnesota, turkey special.
and his online dad jokes will attract rural voters who in recent years have voted broadly for Republican presidential candidate Donald Trump.
We've served when Donald Trump was president, and the threats to our nation were real.
Walz has attacked Trump and his running mate, J.D. Vance, as weird, a catchy insult that has been used by the Harris campaign on social media and among Democratic activists hoping for a victory in November.
Cell phone video shows a Palestinian mother hugging her son, who was just released from an Israeli prison near Hebron in the occupied West Bank last month. Overwhelmed with emotion, she asks if she's really seeing her son. A new report out by an Israeli rights group says Palestinian prisoners held by Israel are subject to a systematic policy of abuse and torture since the start of the war in Gaza on October 7th. Sarit Michaeli is a spokesperson for B'Tselem, which issued the report.
So the people we interviewed for the report have actually been released recently. So clearly Israel does not accuse them of anything, yet they still experience the same kind of systemic abuse and torture that all Palestinian prisoners experience now throughout all of Israel's detention system.
The group said the report was based on interviews with 55 Palestinians from Gaza, the West Bank, and Israel, who were detained in Israeli prisons since the October 7th attack on Israel that set off the war, most of them without being tried. It comes 9 days after the Israeli military detained 9 soldiers accused of severe abuse of a Palestinian prisoner in a military facility. Those arrests touched off protests by right-wing activists defending the accused soldiers. Israeli media reports say the victim, a member of an elite Hamas unit, was subject to sexual assault.
So firstly, it's important to tell the stories of the victims, of people who have been exposed to horrific abuse in Israel's prison system. Additionally, this publication is meant to change the reality. Therefore, B'Tselem has appealed to all nations and to all relevant institutions, including the International Criminal Court, to intervene, to end this reality and to hold Israeli policymakers accountable for what is going on, for the torture of Palestinian prisoners in Israeli prison facilities.
A spokesperson for the Israel Prison Service said that all prisoners were treated according to the law and all basic rights were fully applied by professionally trained guards. The Israeli military, which runs some detention facilities where Palestinian prisoners have been held, said that it operated according to the rule of law and any specific claims of abuse were investigated. Even before last month's arrest of the 9 Israeli soldiers, Palestinians held by Israel had described abuse within the system. Muazzaz Obayat was released from a detention center in July, where he'd been held since October. He spoke to Reuters from a hospital bed in Bethlehem.
Life in jail since October 7th is a life that no human on earth can imagine in general, especially in the Negev prison, which is like Guantanamo. It is a prison in the Negev desert down at the bottom of Palestine on the map. This prison is isolated from the world. They act in the most disgusting and tough torture on earth against isolated detainees handcuffed, hungry, and ill.
The report by B'Tselem, a group that documents human rights violations by Israel in the occupied West Bank and other areas, said the harsh treatment was a deliberate policy implemented under the direction of the hardline National Security Minister Itamar Ben-Gvir. A prison service spokesperson said that since the October 7th attack, Ben-Gvir had ordered that prison conditions be made more strict to reverse an improvement in conditions allowed previously.
Bangladesh's president dissolved parliament on Tuesday, clearing the way for an interim government and new elections. Hundreds gathered on the grounds of Bangladesh's Parliament House in the capital, Dhaka, after Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina resigned and fled the country to a safe house in India on Monday. The movement that toppled Hasina rose out of demonstrations against public sector job quotas for families of veterans of Bangladesh's 1971 independence war. The move was seen by critics as a means to reserve jobs for allies of the ruling party. About 300 people were killed and thousands injured in violence since July. Student protesters had threatened more demonstrations if Parliament was not dissolved. The decision to dissolve Parliament was taken following meetings with the heads of armed forces, leaders of political parties, student leaders and some civil society representatives, the presidential statement said. The group also demanded Nobel Peace Laureate Muhammad Yunus be the interim government's chief advisor. A spokesperson for Yunus said he had agreed. The damage to the Prime Minister's residence clear after it was stormed and looted by demonstrators on Monday.
I think what has happened yesterday, the vandalism, it was not at all appreciated. The palace belongs to the people, like us. We will have to pay for its reconstruction.
The streets of the capital, Dhaka, fell quiet on Tuesday, with traffic lighter, but students stepping up in the absence of police.
We haven't seen any traffic policemen since yesterday evening. That's why we took the responsibility in our hands to control the traffic so everyone can commute smoothly.
The student leaders also said they had received reports of attacks on minority groups, including Hindu temples in the Muslim-majority country. They urged restraint, saying this could undermine their movement.
Violent clashes have gripped parts of the UK in recent days as protests fuelled by anti-immigrant sentiment rage across communities. But what sparked the riots and why are they spreading? On July 29th, 3 girls were murdered in a knife attack at a Taylor Swift-themed dance workshop in the normally quiet seaside town of Southport, a crime that has shocked the nation. Days later, the suspect, 17-year-old Axel Ruda-Kubana, appeared in an English court. Police quickly clarified that the incident was not terrorism-related, adding that Ruda-Kubana was born in Britain and that his parents had moved to the UK from Rwanda. Rumours around the suspect's heritage quickly gained traction online, fueling protests by anti-immigration and anti-Muslim demonstrators, which quickly descended into violence, arson and looting. Cars have been set on fire, and some unverified social media videos have shown ethnic minorities being attacked. False messaging on online platforms has also wrongly identified the suspected killer as a radical Islamist migrant. Police say high-profile figures amplifying these claims have contributed to the public response to the Southport killings. Former leader of the defunct anti-Islam English Defence League, Stephen Yaxley Lennon, who is better known as Tommy Robinson, is one of those being blamed by media for spreading misinformation to his many followers on X. Ex-owner Elon Musk has also weighed in. Responding to a post that blamed mass migration and open borders for the disorder in Britain, he wrote, "Civil war is inevitable." The spokesperson for British Prime Minister Keir Starmer said there was no justification for Musk's comments.
We'll ramp up criminal justice. There have already been hundreds of arrests.
Starmer, who has held emergency meetings with police and prison chiefs, has said violent protesters who target Muslim communities would swiftly face the full force of the law. Police say they've arrested hundreds of people since the start of the unrest and warned of lengthy prison terms for those found guilty of violent disorder. The protests have spread quickly from Southport to several other areas of the UK, with marches held from London to Liverpool, with mosques and hotels housing migrants targeted.
That has become a moment at which to mobilise again.
Director of UK-based think tank British Future, Sundar Katwala, says the Southport knife attack has become a moment for people to mobilise against.
And so that tells us something about the group reputation of those groups among the people with, potentially far-right views and prejudiced views of them. But it is also that groups have been looking for an attempt to create a flashpoint, particularly around asylum accommodation, for the last several months.
The British government also says it's examining the role foreign states are playing in amplifying disinformation online, while warning social media firms they had to do more to stop it. A specialist on right-wing extremism told Reuters that far-right groups are less organised than they were a decade ago, but that they are now highly visible, exploiting modern technology to capture attention.
This footage from northern Nigeria shows Russian flags being waved during anti-government protests on Monday. And it's the reason some tailors who made such flags have been detained, the state's secret police have said. The Department of State Services wrote in a post on social media that it had also detained some of the tailors' sponsors without elaborating. The Russian embassy in Nigeria denied any involvement. However, the detentions underscore concerns about increased Russian activity in West Africa. Russian flags have been waved by residents of Burkina Faso, Mali and Niger amid military coups in those countries. In Nigeria, hundreds of thousands have been protesting since August the 1st over economic hardships and crime. And in the northern states of Borno, Kaduna and Katsina, protesters have been seen waving hundreds of Russian flags, with some calling for a military takeover.
Within the sovereignty of Nigeria.
Nigeria's Chief of Defence Staff, General Christopher Musa, described the flying of foreign flags during anti-government protests as totally unacceptable.
We will not accept anybody, any individual flying any foreign flag in Nigeria. That is a treasonable offence, and it will be viewed and treated as such.
Security experts said many protesters believe Nigeria's cost of living crisis is the result of reforms dictated to President Bola Tinubu by Western institutions such as the International Monetary Fund and the World Bank. The protests have now largely faded after a deadly police crackdown.